In the early hours of December 17, 2024, a shocking and deeply tragic incident occurred at Lion Park, a private zoo nestled in the Parkent district of Uzbekistan's Tashkent region. F. Iriskulov, a 44-year-old zookeeper working the night shift, was found dead inside the lion enclosure in what turned out to be one of the most horrifying animal-related incidents in the country in recent years. According to reports from investigators and local media, the entire event unfolded between 5 and 9 in the morning, during a time when the zoo was still closed to the public and only a handful of staff were on site. At some point in the early morning, Iriskulov entered the lion enclosure. It's still not entirely clear what prompted him to do so, but various accounts suggest he may have been attempting to record a video with the lions, potentially as a way to impress his fiancée. This speculation emerged after investigators reviewed his phone and found that he may have been trying to capture footage of himself close to the animals. However, it's also possible that he was simply trying to interact with them, perhaps assuming that familiarity and routine would protect him. Unfortunately, his decision coincided with a critical safety failure. The cage door had reportedly been left unsecured, allowing 3 lions to access the outer yard freely. When Iriskulov entered the enclosure, he was not dealing with sleepy, tame creatures. These were full-grown lions, strong, unpredictable, and extremely dangerous. As he tried to approach or redirect them, one or more of the lions turned aggressive. He was attacked, mauled, and ultimately killed. Investigators later confirmed that his body had been partially consumed, and initial forensic reports estimated the attack happened just minutes after he entered. With no other staff nearby at the time, there was no one to intervene. His remains were only discovered hours later by a colleague arriving for the morning shift at around 9 a.m. The response was immediate. Emergency services and law enforcement were called to the scene, and a criminal investigation was opened under Uzbekistan's labor and workplace safety regulations. 2 of the lions were quickly located and tranquilized by specialists from the Tashkent Zoo. The 3rd lion, however, had become extremely aggressive and was shot and killed by a local hunter who had been brought in to neutralize the threat. Officials also launched a full-scale inspection of Lion Park's facilities, enclosures, and operational procedures. Experts from the Ministry of Ecology were dispatched to conduct a thorough audit, including checks on all animal enclosures and staff training protocols. What raised further concern was the nature of Lion Park itself. Unlike traditional zoos, this facility operated as a contact zoo, where visitors and staff often had closer than usual access to the animals. These types of attractions, while popular for offering exotic animal encounters, walk a fine line when it comes to safety. Allowing untrained or minimally supervised personnel to interact directly with predators like lions is a recipe for disaster, as this incident painfully demonstrated. The case remains under investigation, with legal proceedings expected to focus on negligence, improper safety procedures, and potential breaches of animal handling regulations. Authorities are also reviewing whether the park should continue operating at all. For the public and for zoo professionals, the incident is a grim reminder of the fine line between fascination and folly. Wild animals, no matter how accustomed they may seem to human presence, are still wild. Respect, distance, and strict safety measures are not optional. They are essential, and when those lines are crossed, the consequences can be fatal. Lisa Left Eye Lopez was a powerhouse, the fiery rapper and the soul of TLC, one of the biggest girl groups to ever grace the 90s music scene. Her edgy style, unique voice, and fearless energy helped define hits like Waterfalls and No Scrubs that still echo through speakers worldwide. But behind the fame was a woman deeply connected to her spirituality and always chasing something bigger than the spotlight. In April 2002, Lisa was on a journey to find peace during a spiritual retreat in Honduras, a country she had come to love. Sadly, her life was tragically cut short in a car crash that shocked fans and friends alike. Lisa had been traveling with 8 others in a rented Mitsubishi Montero SUV, a trip being filmed for a documentary. On April 25th, the vehicle was cruising along a highway in La Ceiba when Lisa suddenly swerved sharply to avoid an oncoming truck that was drifting into their lane. The SUV lost control, flipping multiple times in a violent roll. The crash was chaotic. Passengers were thrown from the vehicle, some seriously injured, but Lisa was the only fatality. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and when the SUV flipped, she was ejected from the car, suffering severe head and neck injuries that claimed her life at the scene. The terrifying accident was caught on camera by one of the passengers, adding an eerie sense of raw reality to the tragedy. This moment wasn't just a random crash. Lisa had expressed a haunting sense of premonition in the days before. She believed a spirit was following her, convinced the SUV had been involved in a previous fatal accident, and that this mysterious force was warning her. This blend of superstition and real danger gave the tragedy an almost mystical air, underscoring the vulnerability she felt beneath her fierce public image. Lisa's passing rocked the music world and left a profound sense of loss for those who knew her or admired her work. Thousands turned out for her funeral at the New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia, where family, friends, and fans gathered to celebrate the life of an artist who had left an indelible mark on music and culture. More than just a talented musician, Lisa was known for her generous heart and her dedication to helping others. In fact, she had spent considerable time in Honduras, investing in the local community and planning projects to support underprivileged children. After her death, her family created the Lisa Lopez Foundation, dedicated to continuing this work and preserving her legacy by making a positive difference where she had found inspiration. Beyond the public eye, Lisa was a woman who battled personal struggles and embraced spirituality in a deeply personal way. She was open about her challenges, including self-doubt and a search for meaning, which made her an inspiring figure to many. Her music often reflected these themes, blending social consciousness with raw emotion, something that helped TLC become a voice for a generation. Her tragic death was a harsh reminder of life's fragility, but also a testament to the lasting impact one individual can have, even in a brief lifetime. Today, Lisa Left Eye Lopez is remembered not just for the accident that ended her life, but for the vibrant energy and creativity she brought to the world. Her contributions to music remain timeless, her voice still inspiring new generations of artists and fans. Songs like Waterfalls continue to resonate with messages of caution and hope, echoing Lisa's own journey of growth and healing. While the crash was a heartbreaking chapter, her story also celebrates a legacy of passion, spirituality, and compassion. The Lisa Lopez Foundation keeps her spirit alive by helping children in Honduras, a country that became a second home to her. Lisa's life and untimely death remind us that behind every star is a human being searching for light, meaning, and connection. A quest that sometimes takes unexpected and tragic turns, but it's the brightness of that light and the love she left behind that truly define her memory, making sure she lives on far beyond the final crash. On April 3, 2014, in Eloy, Arizona, about 65 miles south of Phoenix, the desert sky was clear, with perfect conditions for skydiving. At Skydive Arizona, one of the country's premier skydiving facilities, 222 skydivers from 28 nations had gathered with a shared goal: to break the world record for the most people to complete 2 aerial formations during freefall before deploying their parachutes. Among the elite skydivers was 46-year-old Diana Paris from Berlin, Germany. With over 1,500 jumps to her name, Diana was a seasoned veteran and a respected figure in the skydiving community. She was part of the prestigious World Team, a group of expert skydivers who had trained for 18 months to perfect this highly coordinated jump. The plan was as daring as it was intricate. The skydivers would leap from aircraft at 18,000 feet, form a specific shape in the air, break apart, reform into a second shape, and then deploy their parachutes. As the sun rose over the desert and the clock struck 7:30 a.m., the jumpers suited up in vibrant jumpsuits and strapped on oxygen masks for the high-altitude dive. Excitement surged as they boarded the planes, each carrying a group of participants. Once at altitude, the signal was given. One by one, skydivers exited the aircraft, falling through the sky at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. The first formation came together flawlessly, a breathtaking display of color and precision. As they transitioned into the second formation, all appeared to be going according to plan. Then, tragedy struck. Diana Paris's main parachute malfunctioned and failed to deploy correctly. In skydiving, timing is everything. When the main parachute fails, the reserve chute must be deployed quickly. Unfortunately, Diana was too close to the ground when the malfunction occurred. Her reserve parachute didn't have enough time or altitude to fully open, and she fell to the ground. At 7:42 a.m., emergency responders were called to the scene. Diana was pronounced dead upon impact. The skydiving community was stunned. Skydive Arizona confirmed the accident, stating that the malfunction was unrelated to group size or weather. It had been a rare equipment failure at the worst possible moment. Diana's husband, who had attended the event, told investigators that she was deeply experienced and well aware of the risks. This wasn't her first major jump, and she had trained extensively for this record attempt. Her death underscored a harsh truth of the sport. Even experts are vulnerable when gear fails. In the face of grief, the world team chose to move forward. They held an emotional meeting, deciding to honor Diana's legacy in the most fitting way by continuing the record attempt. However, they made one heartfelt change. The formation would now consist of 221 skydivers, with Diana's position left open in a missing woman tribute. On the day of the tribute jump, emotions ran high. The team executed the formation beautifully, with Diana's empty slot a silent salute to their lost teammate. The accident sparked an investigation by local police and the FAA, confirming it was a tragic equipment failure, reminding all that skydiving, no matter how well planned, always carries inherent risks. Let's rewind to a crisp November day in 2012 at the Pittsburgh Zoo and PPG Aquarium, a place where families go for laughs, awe, and maybe a few roars from behind the glass. Among the visitors that day were Elizabeth Durkosh and her 2-year-old son Maddox. Maddox wasn't just any kid, he was a curious, energetic little boy with a love for trucks and all things wild. Like many toddlers, he was fascinated by animals, and when the pair approached the African painted dog exhibit home to a pack of powerful, fast, and highly predatory canines, it must have felt like walking into a real-life jungle scene. What happened next still sends shivers down spines. Elizabeth, trying to help her son get a better look at the action, lifted him onto the railing. It was something countless parents have probably done in zoos around the world, hoisting a child up to see better, just for a moment. But that one moment turned into unimaginable horror. Maddox suddenly lost his balance, slipped, and fell first, bouncing off a net that was designed to catch dropped objects, not small children, and plunged nearly 14 feet into the enclosure below. Within seconds, the African painted dogs swarmed him. These animals, while smaller than lions or tigers, are efficient pack hunters with razor-sharp instincts. Zoo staff and first responders did what they could. Some tried to lure the dogs away. Others shouted and threw things to distract them. A police officer ultimately fired a shot, killing one of the dogs that refused to retreat. But it was tragically too late. The autopsy later revealed that Maddox had survived the fall, but died quickly from the severe injuries caused by the attack. The incident was both a heartbreaking accident and a lightning rod for controversy. The public reacted with a mix of grief, outrage, and finger-pointing. Was it the mother's fault? Was it a lapse in zoo safety? Should the enclosure have been designed differently? Allegheny County prosecutors ultimately ruled it a tragic accident and declined to file criminal charges, but that didn't stop a storm of civil litigation. Maddox's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the zoo, citing past internal safety reports that had warned about visitors lifting children over railings, warnings that were reportedly not followed up with any design changes. In response, the zoo filed its own claim, arguing that the mother bore full responsibility for the fall. Eventually, a confidential settlement was reached, but the impact of that day went far beyond the courtroom. The African painted dog exhibit was permanently shut down, and the dogs were relocated. The area was later transformed into a cheetah enclosure, perhaps a quieter, more controlled setting. In the midst of grief, something beautiful emerged. Maddox's family started a movement called Trucks for Maddox, where people donated toy trucks to children in hospitals and charities honoring the boy's love for his favorite toys. His memory, though tied to an unthinkable tragedy, lives on through the kindness of strangers and the changes made to prevent another accident like this. The story of Maddox Durkosh serves as a sobering reminder. Zoos, for all their fun and wonder, house wild animals, and even a momentary lapse can have irreversible consequences. It's a tale of love, loss, and the very human need to reflect and learn from tragedy, especially when innocent lives are involved. It was the final hours of August 30th, 1997, when Princess Diana, still very much the world's beloved people's princess, stepped into a black Mercedes-Benz S280 with her partner Dotty West, leaving the Ritz Hotel in Paris. The two had been trying to enjoy a romantic evening, but their every move was tracked by the paparazzi like a pack of wolves on scooters. To avoid the cameras, the hotel's security team devised a plan. A decoy car would leave the front of the hotel to draw attention, while Diana and Dotty would quietly slip out the back with their driver, Henry Paul, and bodyguard Trevor Reese-Jones. Henry Paul, who was also the hotel's acting head of security, had been seen on CCTV behaving strangely before the trip, smiling, waving, and walking with an odd swagger. What no one realized until later was that Paul was heavily intoxicated. Toxicology reports later showed his blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit in France, and he had traces of prescription drugs in his system. Nevertheless, the group left the hotel around 12:20 a.m., with Paul speeding away from the paparazzi at around 65 miles per hour in a zone that allowed less than half that. Just minutes later, as they entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel on the right bank of the River Seine, things turned catastrophic. The road curves sharply inside the tunnel, and Paul lost control of the Mercedes at high speed. The car struck the 13th pillar of the tunnel, crushing the front and sending the vehicle spinning into the opposite wall. The impact was devastating. Dotty West and Henry Paul were killed instantly. Trevor Reese-Jones, sitting in the front passenger seat, suffered massive facial injuries but survived. Princess Diana, who had been sitting in the rear seat on the right side, was still alive but gravely injured. Witnesses on the scene reported that she was conscious and moaning in pain. Emergency services arrived within minutes, but rather than rush her immediately to the hospital, medics treated her inside the wrecked car for nearly an hour before carefully transporting her. Diana went into cardiac arrest on the way to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital, where surgeons attempted emergency surgery to repair internal injuries, including a torn pulmonary vein. Despite their efforts, she was pronounced dead at 4 a.m. Her injuries had been too severe. Notably, neither Diana nor Dotty were wearing seatbelts at the time of the crash, which likely contributed to the severity of their injuries. The news of Diana's death sent a shockwave around the world. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, stunned and grieving. In Paris, people left flowers at the site of the crash and lit candles near the hospital. In the days that followed, criticism erupted over the role of the paparazzi, who were blamed for relentlessly chasing the car. 7 photographers were initially arrested at the scene, and conspiracy theories soon followed, suggesting the crash might not have been accidental. However, official investigations by both French and British authorities concluded that the primary cause was Henri Paul's impaired driving and excessive speed, compounded by the lack of seatbelt use. Diana's funeral on September 6th was watched by more than 2.5 billion people worldwide. Her legacy continues to resonate, not just as a style icon or humanitarian, but as someone who humanized royalty and made the world care about the woman behind the crown. Even decades later, her story still feels raw, tragic, and unforgettable. On April 11, 1996, in Cheyenne, Wyoming, a tragic event unfolded during what was meant to be an inspiring coast-to-coast journey. 7-year-old Jessica Dubroff, a bright and ambitious girl from Falmouth, Massachusetts, was attempting to become the youngest person to fly across the United States. Accompanying her were her father, 57-year-old Lloyd Dubroff, and 52-year-old Joe Reed, a part-time flight instructor and full-time stockbroker. The trio was flying a Cessna 177B in what they called the Sea to Shining Sea flight, a 900-mile adventure from the Pacific to the Atlantic. The journey had begun the day before, on April 10th, from Half Moon Bay, California. Their goal was to reach the East Coast within 8 days, with multiple stops along the way for rest and media interviews. The flight quickly drew national attention as news outlets became captivated by the young girl's charm and daring mission. Footage showed Jessica perched in the cockpit on a booster seat, gripping the yoke with both hands and rudder extensions at her feet, all under Reed's supervision. Behind the scenes, it was Jessica's father, Lloyd, who orchestrated the trip. Although he wasn't a certified pilot, he managed the itinerary and coordinated media appearances. His enthusiasm for the spotlight meant long flight days, early morning interviews, and tight schedules. He handed out branded Sea to Shining Sea baseball caps and even filmed parts of the journey for ABC News. But as excitement grew, so did concern over the safety and practicality of such an ambitious endeavor, especially with a child in the cockpit. On the morning of April 11th, the weather in Cheyenne was quickly deteriorating. Thunderstorms were moving in, bringing gusty winds, rain, and hail. Despite these dangerous conditions, Reed, fatigued from the prior day's flights, chose to press on in order to stay on schedule. The plane, already overloaded with gear and passengers, faced additional strain from Cheyenne's high-altitude airport, over 6,600 feet above sea level. While Reed had logged over 1,400 flight hours, Most of his experience was in lower-altitude coastal areas, making this leg particularly challenging. Jessica had about 33 hours of instruction time, but the image of her as the flight's true pilot was more symbolic than real, a narrative largely fueled by media and her father's publicity push. In fact, both the FAA and the Guinness Book of Records had already distanced themselves from recognizing such record attempts due to safety concerns. Shortly after takeoff from runway 30, the Cessna struggled to climb. Witnesses watched helplessly as it barely cleared 400 feet, before banking right and nose-diving into a residential neighborhood. The impact was catastrophic. All three on board were killed instantly. Though there was no fire, the front of the aircraft was destroyed, and fuel had spilled across the crash site. In the aftermath, national grief turned into legislative action. President Bill Clinton signed the Child Pilot Safety Act, banning unlicensed individuals, particularly minors, from attempting aviation records. The law aimed to ensure that aviation challenges were left in the hands of trained, qualified pilots and to prevent future tragedies born from well-intentioned but dangerous dreams. It's not every day that you hear about a fatal kangaroo attack in the United States. In fact, it's almost unheard of, but that's exactly what happened in May 2025 in Loris, South Carolina. A 52-year-old man named Eric Slate tragically lost his life after an encounter with a kangaroo at a local petting zoo. It sounds like something pulled from a strange headline generator, but it's a very real and sobering reminder of how unpredictable and dangerous even tame animals can be. The incident took place at 5 Star Farms, a family-run petting zoo where visitors could interact with animals like goats, wallabies, and, yes, kangaroos. Eric Slate wasn't just any visitor, he was the brother of the zoo's owner, Robert Slate, and had spent plenty of time around the animals. According to local reports, Eric had previously gone into the kangaroo enclosure multiple times, sometimes engaging in light roughhousing with one of the farm's resident kangaroos, a large red kangaroo affectionately known by locals as Mr. Jack. But on the night of May 9th, things took a tragic turn. At some point that evening, Eric entered the enclosure again, presumably thinking it would be just another playful interaction. Unfortunately, it wasn't. When he didn't return for some time, others went to check on him. That's when his body was discovered inside the pen, lifeless, with clear signs of trauma. The Horry County coroner later confirmed that. Eric had died from multiple blunt force injuries consistent with an animal attack. While authorities didn't explicitly say the kangaroo was the attacker, the circumstances made it heartbreakingly obvious. Kangaroos, while often seen as quirky, hopping mascots of Australia, can be incredibly strong and territorial, especially the big males. They're built like bodybuilders with legs that can shatter bones and claws that can do real damage if they feel threatened. And in this case, what was probably meant to be harmless fun may have been interpreted by the kangaroo as a challenge or threat. The news shocked both locals and people across the country, not just for the tragedy itself, but because of how incredibly rare such incidents are. In fact, fatal kangaroo attacks are almost non-existent in the U.S., and even in Australia, where kangaroos outnumber people, deaths from these marsupials are staggeringly rare. The last confirmed kangaroo-related death in Australia happened back in 1936. The farm quickly came under scrutiny. Authorities began inspecting the enclosures, evaluating animal safety, and conducting a full investigation to make sure no negligence had occurred. But Robert Slate, the owner and grieving brother, assured the public that the animals were secure and there was no danger to visitors. The kangaroo involved wasn't euthanized and remains at the farm, now the quiet center of a deeply unfortunate story. This incident sparked a broader conversation about exotic animal ownership, petting zoo safety, and how even well-meaning interactions with wild animals can end unpredictably. It's easy to forget that animals like kangaroos, even when raised in captivity, still have instincts that don't always mix well with human playfulness. Eric Slate's death is a tragic loss that left his family and community reeling. And while it may sound surreal, it serves as a powerful reminder. Wild animals, no matter how familiar they may seem, deserve our respect, not our roughhousing. Once upon a winding road in the picture-perfect hills of Monaco, the glitz of old Hollywood and the elegance of royalty collided with tragic fate. Grace Kelly, Oscar-winning actress, Hitchcock muse, and full-time real-life princess, was behind the wheel of her metallic green Rover P63500 on the morning of September 13th, 1982. Riding shotgun was her 17-year-old daughter, Princess Stephanie, probably half listening to her mom's commentary about life, traffic, or whatever royals chat about on Monday mornings. They were heading back to the prince's palace from their country estate in Rock Agol, taking the famously twisty and treacherous mountain road known as D37, a route filled with sharp turns, blind corners, and not much room for error. As the car snaked its way downhill, something went horribly wrong. Somewhere near the bend known as Devil's Curve, and yes, that is its actual spine-tingling name, Grace reportedly blacked out at the wheel. The official cause? A mild cerebral hemorrhage, basically a small stroke which struck at the worst possible time. Mid-turn on a narrow cliffside road, the Rover veered violently off course, barreled through a low stone wall, and plunged about 120 feet down a steep embankment, cartwheeling through trees and rocks before crashing into someone's backyard. The car was mangled. Grace was critically injured, unconscious, and suffering from massive internal bleeding and brain trauma. Stephanie was trapped in the wreckage, tangled in twisted metal, reportedly trying to climb out and help her mother despite having a fractured neck and serious bruises. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, cutting through the crumpled vehicle to reach them. Both were rushed to the Centre Hospitalier Princesse Grace. Yes, a hospital named after Grace herself, which adds a strange poetic twist to the story. Doctors worked tirelessly, but Grace never regained consciousness. She was placed on life support, and despite brief glimmers of hope, the damage was irreversible. On September 14th, the world got the devastating news. Princess Grace of Monaco had died at the age of 52. The world gasped. Royal watchers, Hollywood fans, and regular folks alike couldn't believe it. This was Grace Kelly, the woman who looked like she stepped out of a dream, who had danced with Fred Astaire on screen and married a prince in real life. The fairy tale wasn't supposed to end like this, with a car wreck and a tragic twist on a mountain road. Then came the rumors. Oh boy, the tabloids had a field day. Some claimed that Stephanie was the one driving, not Grace. Others whispered about a fight, a distraction, even mechanical failure. The palace denied it all, firmly stating that Grace had been at the wheel. And to be fair, there was no solid proof of anything else, just a lot of sorrow and speculation. Grace's funeral was attended by a who's who of the world. Princess Diana, Cary Grant, Nancy Reagan, and royalty from every corner of Europe. Her coffin was carried through Monaco's cathedral, the same one where she had married Prince Rainier in that dreamy lace wedding dress back in 1956. The prince, heartbroken and visibly aged overnight, never really recovered from the loss. Today, the crash site is quiet, marked only by a humble plaque. But the story lives on part fairy tale, part Greek tragedy, with a touch of tabloid mystery. Grace Kelly's life was cinematic from start to finish, and though her final scene was heartbreakingly real, her legacy remains larger than life. It was a freezing morning on January 4th, 1967, in England's scenic Lake District. The sky was clear, the water calm, and 45-year-old Donald Campbell, legendary speed enthusiast, was ready to make history again. Behind the controls of his jet-powered hydroplane, the Bluebird K7, Campbell was attempting to break his own world water speed record. And this wasn't just any attempt. He'd already done it 7 times before. For weeks, Campbell had battled relentless bad weather and technical issues. But on this day, everything finally seemed to be lining up. The stakes were sky high, but so was his determination. Now let's talk about this machine, Bluebird K7. Designed by Ken and Lou Norris, it was a jet-powered beast with a sleek aluminum body and steel frame. It had a Metropolitan Vickers barrel axial flow turbojet engine, kicking out an insane 3,500 pounds of thrust. With its unusual pickle fork design, the Bluebird looked more like a futuristic aircraft than a boat, and it had already brought Campbell immense success on the water. At 8:45 a.m., with snow-capped hills reflecting off the still lake, the Bluebird was launched. Campbell, ever composed, gave a simple thumbs up before beginning his first run. Heading south across Coniston Water, he reached an average speed of 297 miles per hour. To break the record, he needed a 300 miles per hour average on the return leg. After a brief pause, he turned the boat around and began his second run, this time heading north. But something wasn't right. The water, although seemingly smooth, had small ripples. Campbell's voice came through the radio. "She's tramping," he said. a signal that the boat was gaining serious speed. Moments later, he added, "Full power. The water's not good. I can't see much." Then came his chilling final words. "I am upside down. She's going." Traveling at over 300 miles per hour, Bluebird's nose suddenly lifted. The hydroplane pitched backward, launched 50 feet into the air, then crashed nose first into the lake in a violent spray. The boat disintegrated on impact, disappearing beneath the water almost instantly. Divers tried desperately to recover Campbell's body, but they didn't have the right equipment. Only parts of the Bluebird, including the sponsons, were found. The next day, the search resumed with better tools. That night, his wife Tonya, a cabaret singer, arrived from London. Grieving, shocked, and overwhelmed. Campbell had always known the dangers of his passion. He once said that if the Bluebird's nose ever lifted even slightly, it could mean disaster. Tragically, that's exactly what happened, just 200 yards from the end of the measured course. Although he didn't complete the run, Campbell still held the official water speed record at 276.3 miles per hour, set in 1964 in Australia. But Donald Campbell's legacy wasn't just in the numbers. He was the son of Sir Malcolm Campbell, another speed record legend, and he devoted his life to chasing velocity, on land and water. His journey began back in 1949, using his father's Bluebird K4. Despite setbacks, he pressed on, eventually designing the revolutionary K7 in 1953, the first jet-powered boat to succeed. Between 1955 and 1964, he broke the water speed record 7 times. He even went after the land speed record in Australia, battling immense challenges to set a new mark in 1964. Over the years, Bluebird K7 was constantly upgraded, reflecting Campbell's relentless pursuit of perfection. After the fatal crash, Bluebird remained at the bottom of Coniston Water for decades. Then in 2001, engineer Bill Smith recovered the wreck and Campbell's body. The boat was painstakingly restored, sparking a legal battle over its ownership. But in 2018, something incredible happened. Bluebird K7 returned to the water in Scotland, hitting 150 miles per hour once again. Thousands watched, including Campbell's daughter Gina, as the iconic machine came back to life. Today, you can visit Bluebird at the Ruskin Museum in Coniston, where a special wing honors Donald Campbell's legacy and his unbreakable connection to this quiet corner of England. Zoos are usually places of laughter, school trips, and awkward penguin photos, not biblical reenactments gone tragically wrong. But on May 21, 2016, the Santiago Metropolitan Zoo in Chile became the scene of a deeply unsettling and controversial incident. A 20-year-old man named Franco Luis Ferrada climbed into the lion enclosure in what appeared to be a suicide attempt, or, as some speculated, a religiously fueled delusion. What followed was a chain of events that shook the country, sparked international outrage, and raised tough questions about mental health, animal rights, and emergency protocols. It began like something out of a surreal novel. Ferrada reportedly stripped naked, climbed over a safety barrier, and entered the enclosure housing 3 lions. Witnesses later said he shouted religious phrases and seemed to believe he was reenacting the biblical story of Daniel, the guy who hung out with lions and walked away without a scratch. Sadly, this wasn't a Sunday school tale. The lions, behaving as lions do, attacked Ferrada almost immediately. Zookeepers were thrown into a horrible dilemma. Tranquilizers take time to work, and Ferrada's life was in immediate danger. With no time to spare, the zoo staff made a decision they later called devastating but necessary. They fatally shot 2 of the lions, a male and a female, who had been long-term residents of the zoo. A 3rd lioness managed to retreat and survived. Ferrada was critically injured, suffering severe trauma to his head, chest, and pelvis, but he lived. He was placed in a medically induced coma and later began a slow recovery. The aftermath was an emotional firestorm. Chileans were heartbroken and furious, not necessarily at Ferrada, but at the fact that 2 beloved animals had been killed to save a man who had willingly put himself in harm's way. Animal rights activists staged protests outside the zoo, held candlelight vigils, and demanded accountability. Some called for better mental health support systems, others for improved zoo security, or even the closure of the facility altogether. Ferrada's backstory added layers to the tragedy. He had reportedly struggled with his mental health and carried a note referencing apocalyptic visions and divine destiny signed Jesus. It painted a picture of a young man in profound distress, lost in a dangerous delusion. The incident reignited debates about how society handles mental illness, particularly when it leads to public crises with irreversible consequences. Meanwhile, the zoo, already under scrutiny for previous incidents involving animal welfare, found itself in hot water. Critics slammed its emergency protocols, questioned the adequacy of its security barriers, and called for reforms in how zoos handle both people and animals in high-risk situations. The zoo director defended the actions taken, emphasizing that staff did everything they could to save a human life, but admitted the emotional toll was massive. "We are deeply affected," she said. "We had to sacrifice 2 animals that were part of our family." In the end, the Santiago Zoo incident was more than just a bizarre headline. It was a tragic convergence of mental illness, human error, and institutional pressure. 2 majestic animals lost their lives, a young man nearly died, and an entire nation was left wrestling with what the right decision even means in a moment of chaos. It's a haunting reminder that real life doesn't always give us neat answers, just hard questions, and hopefully, the resolve to do better next time. Anton Yelchin's death in 2016 was a heartbreaking accident that stunned both his fans and the wider entertainment community. On June 19th, at his home in Los Angeles, the young actor was tragically found pinned between his own Jeep Grand Cherokee and a brick mailbox pillar at the bottom of a steep driveway. What made the incident especially shocking was the bizarre and freakish nature of the accident. The SUV had unexpectedly rolled backward down the incline, trapping Anton in a terrifying way with no chance to escape. The steepness of the driveway was a key factor that turned what should have been a simple moment of parking into a deadly situation. Despite the prompt arrival of emergency responders, Anton succumbed to his injuries at the young age of 27. At a time when his career was rapidly ascending and his creative talents were widely recognized, this sudden loss left a profound void in Hollywood and among fans worldwide. Digging deeper into the accident reveals a troubling mechanical flaw in the Jeep model Anton owned that played a central role in the tragedy. The gearshift mechanism on this particular Jeep Grand Cherokee had a design flaw that could confuse drivers. Even when the gearshift appeared to be in park, the vehicle might not have been fully secured. This meant the SUV could roll away if the parking brake wasn't properly engaged, despite the driver thinking the car was safely parked. This issue wasn't isolated to Anton's Jeep alone. Other owners of the same model had reported similar rollaway incidents. The investigation following his death intensified scrutiny on this mechanical flaw, leading Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, the Jeep's manufacturer, to issue recalls and software updates aimed at preventing future accidents. The incident highlighted the unexpected dangers of modern car designs and the importance of safety engineering, revealing how a seemingly minor issue could turn everyday tasks like parking a vehicle into fatal hazards. Beyond the tragic details of the accident itself, Anton Yelchin's life and legacy remain deeply impactful. Known primarily for his role as Pavel Chekhov in the Star Trek reboot films, Anton was more than just a sci-fi star. He was a gifted actor whose performances displayed emotional depth, versatility, and a natural charisma. He was also an artist outside of acting, dabbling in photography and music, reflecting a creative spirit that extended beyond the screen. Colleagues and fans alike admired his humility and kindness, qualities that made him approachable and beloved despite his rising fame. His untimely death at just 27 was not only a shock, but a tragic reminder of life's fragility and unpredictability. The loss resonated deeply, inspiring calls for improved vehicle safety and greater awareness of hidden dangers in everyday objects. Yet, despite the sorrow, Anton's work continues to inspire, and his memory lives on as a testament to a young life and career that were full of promise, talent, and genuine warmth. It was April 28, 2013, in the scenic hills of Darjeeling, India. Crowds gathered along the famous Coronation Bridge perched nearly 10,000 feet above sea level, buzzing with excitement. The man they came to see, Surendranath Roy, a 49-year-old police driver and stunt performer with a reputation for doing the impossible. Today he was attempting yet another jaw-dropping feat, crossing the Teesta River on a zipline, using nothing but his hair. Yes, his hair. Roy wasn't new to this kind of daredevil stunt. In fact, he already held a Guinness World Record for the farthest distance traveled on a zip wire using his hair. Just the year before, he had pulled a 42-ton train with his hair and traveled 270 feet on a zip line the same way. He was fearless, determined, and passionate about pushing the limits of human potential. With spectators watching from both ends of the bridge, Roy prepared for the stunt with patriotic pride. He wore a life jacket, carried the Indian flag, and carefully attached his long hair to the pulley mechanism of the zipline, stretched 180 meters across the roaring Teesta River below. Then, with confidence and control, he launched himself out over the water. At first, things went smoothly. Roy glided across the wire with apparent ease, making it halfway across the river. But then, tragedy struck. His ponytail became tangled in the zipline's wheeler. Suddenly, he was stuck, dangling in midair, unable to move forward. At first, the crowd continued to cheer, not realizing something had gone wrong. Roy began struggling, trying to free himself, using his arms to propel forward. But the more he fought, the more entangled his hair became. It was a terrifying situation, and he was alone up there, suspended above the river, unable to get help. Minutes ticked by. The cheers faded. The crowd slowly realized this wasn't part of the act. For 25 agonizing minutes, Sailendra hung in the air, battling both the zip wire and the limits of human endurance. Witnesses described him trying to yell instructions, but his voice was faint and his words unclear. His movements slowed. Eventually, he stopped moving altogether. The most heartbreaking part? There was no medical team on site, no ambulance, no trained emergency personnel. Roy remained suspended for nearly 45 minutes before rescuers finally managed to bring him down. He was rushed to a hospital in Siliguri, about 450 kilometers away. But by the time he arrived, it was too late. Sailendra Nath Roy was declared dead on arrival. The cause? A major cardiac arrest, likely triggered by extreme physical and emotional stress. Photographers and spectators were devastated. Balai Sutar, one of the photographers covering the event, recalled, "He was desperately trying to move forward. He was trying to scream, but no one could understand him. After struggling for 30 minutes, he became still." Roy's family, including his wife and 2 sons, were present during the stunt. His brother Benoy, watching one of Roy's performances for the very first time, spoke through tears. "We were proud of his bravery. He was sure to win, but destiny has taken the most beloved member of our family." In the days that followed, the tragedy raised serious concerns. Authorities revealed that Roy hadn't received proper permission to perform the stunt. He wasn't on duty at the time, and safety measures were sorely lacking. The absence of medical staff at such a dangerous event sparked outrage and a national conversation about the need for stricter regulations around extreme stunts. Despite the heartbreaking end, Sailendra Nath Roy left behind a legacy of courage and unshakable determination. His life was defined by a deep desire to challenge what seemed impossible, but his death served as a sobering reminder of just how high the cost of such ambition can be. It was a hot and hazy afternoon in September 2014 at the National Zoological Park in Delhi. The usual crowd of families, tourists, and snack-hunting monkeys filled the place. Kids were buzzing with excitement. Parents were trying to keep them from climbing into cages. And somewhere in the background, ice creams were melting faster than tempers. Amid this zoo, chaos walked a 20-year-old man named Maqsood Khan. He was barefoot, wearing shabby clothes, and appeared disoriented. According to some witnesses, he had been wandering alone for a while, looking confused. Maqsood ended up near the enclosure of one of the zoo's star attractions, a majestic male white tiger named Vijay. The tiger enclosure had a small barrier that looked more like a polite suggestion than an actual safety measure. With barely a waist-high fence to keep people back, it was practically an invitation to disaster. Whether Maqsood climbed over intentionally or simply slipped is something no one could confirm with certainty. But in a matter of seconds, he found himself inside the enclosure, having fallen about 18 feet down into the dry moat that separated humans from one of nature's most formidable predators. What followed was a scene straight out of a surreal movie. The tiger approached slowly, not immediately aggressive, just alert and curious. For a tense few minutes, the giant cat and the terrified man stared at each other. Maqsood crouched against the wall of the moat, frozen with fear. People above began screaming. Some yelled at the tiger, some threw rocks and sticks, probably thinking they were helping. Others did what 21st century people often do during a crisis. They pulled out their phones and started filming. It was absolute mayhem. But for Vijay the tiger, the situation had shifted. The loud noises, the flying debris, the agitation from above all of it seemed to trigger his instincts. Within moments, he pounced. The crowd erupted in horror as the white tiger attacked Maksud with terrifying speed and force. Some reports said the tiger dragged him around for several minutes. Others claimed the death was almost instantaneous. Either way, zoo officials failed to respond in time to prevent the tragedy. By the time help arrived, Maksud was already dead. The public outrage that followed was immediate and intense. People questioned how anyone could access a tiger enclosure so easily. Many wondered why the zoo had such low safety railings, especially around a predator's exhibit. Others criticized the staff for having no tranquilizer guns ready or emergency protocol in place. It became a storm of accusations, debates, and sensational media coverage. Some reports painted Maksud as mentally ill and vulnerable, someone who had fallen through the cracks of society. Others portrayed him as reckless or suicidal. But beyond the speculation, one truth stood tall: the zoo had failed on multiple levels to protect both the animal and the visitor. Surprisingly, the white tiger was not harmed in the aftermath. Animal rights groups stepped in immediately, reminding everyone that VJ was simply reacting as any wild animal would. He had not escaped. He had not attacked unprovoked. He was in his home, and a human had trespassed into it. The authorities agreed, and the tiger was spared. He remained at the zoo, still majestic, still deadly, and now even more famous. This incident forced a national conversation about zoo safety standards, mental health awareness, and our fascination with wild animals. It became a grim reminder that no matter how many signs we post or fences we build, the wild does not forgive human error. Maksud Khan's death was a tragedy that could have been prevented with stronger barriers, better planning, and a lot more attention to public safety. His story, captured on shaky phone cameras and broadcast to the world, remains a haunting example of what happens when human negligence meets raw, unfiltered nature. Dotty West was one of country music's brightest stars, a trailblazing singer and songwriter whose voice could make you smile, cry, or grab your boots and dance all night long. By 1991, she had already left a massive mark on the genre, but fate had one last heartbreaking chapter waiting for her. On August 30th of that year, she was driving to perform at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee, a stage so iconic it could make any country artist's heart race. The Opry was where legends performed and legacies were cemented, and Dotty was ready to take her place there once again. But as the story goes, her car suddenly stalled on the road, leaving her stranded and frustrated. Luckily, her neighbor, George Thaxton, a kind-hearted gentleman in his 80s, happened to see her trouble and stopped to offer help. Being the good neighbor he was, George volunteered to drive Dotty to the Opry so she wouldn't miss her performance. Everything seemed under control as they got back on the road, but tragedy was closer than anyone realized. While taking an exit ramp on Briley Parkway, the car suddenly lost control. It went airborne and slammed into an embankment in a violent crash. George suffered serious injuries, but shockingly, Dotty appeared okay at first glance. Rescue crews and bystanders breathed a sigh of relief, thinking she had escaped without major harm. But underneath it all, she had sustained critical internal injuries, a ruptured spleen, and a lacerated liver that were not immediately obvious. These hidden wounds were deadly, and she was rushed to the hospital where doctors fought hard to save her life. Despite multiple surgeries and all the best medical care, Dotty West passed away on September 4th, 1991 during her third surgery. It was a devastating blow not just to her family and friends, but to the entire country music community, which mourned the loss of a beloved pioneer whose voice and spirit shaped the genre for decades. The aftermath of the accident revealed even more about the tragedy. George Thaxton faced legal consequences and pleaded no contest to reckless endangerment. Reports indicated alcohol was involved in the crash, and George was sentenced to 11 months of probation along with an alcohol recovery program. The incident served as a sobering reminder of how fragile life can be and how quickly it can change. Dotty West was more than just a singer. She was a woman who broke barriers in country music, inspiring countless artists with her heartfelt songs and determined spirit. Her death marked the end of an era, but also sparked reflection across Nashville and the broader music world. Fans, musicians, and industry figures remembered her not only for her unforgettable voice, but also for her resilience and kindness. Over the years, her influence grew even stronger, and in 2018, she was posthumously inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, a testament to the lasting impact she had on the genre she loved so much. Her music still resonates, reminding listeners of a time when country songs were raw, real, and filled with emotion. Dotty West's story is one of talent, kindness, and a sudden tragedy that stopped a vibrant life far too soon. Her legacy lives on in the songs she left behind and the trail she blazed for future generations of country musicians. The accident that took her life was a harsh reminder of how unpredictable the road can be, both literally and figuratively. But through it all, Dotty's spirit and music remain as strong as ever. Whenever you hear her voice on the radio or in a playlist, remember the woman who gave so much of herself to her art and her fans. Despite the heartbreak of that late summer crash, Dotty West continues to inspire with every note she sang and every story she told. Life might have thrown her a curveball, but her legacy is forever a steady beat in the heart of country music history. On August 27, 2019, in the vast, sun-baked expanse of Oregon's Alvord Desert, 39-year-old Jessi Combs was chasing history. A fearless American jet car racer known to fans as the fastest woman on four wheels, Jessi had one bold mission: to break a land speed record that had stood unchallenged since 1976. Jessi wasn't new to high-stakes speed. She had been passionate about racing and pushing the limits of engineering for years. In 2013, she had already set a record of 641 kilometers per h, earning her the title of the fastest woman on four wheels. But that wasn't enough. Her true goal was to beat Kitty O'Neill's legendary 823 kilometers per h record and become the fastest woman on Earth. That August morning, Jessi woke up to an alarm that declared, "Let's make history." Alongside her team from the North American Eagle (NAE) project, a group that had transformed a retired F-104 starfighter jet into a 52,000 horsepower land vehicle, she headed out to the dry lake bed. Her boyfriend and teammate, Terry Madden, documented the day, capturing her determination and joy as she prepared for what she hoped would be her final, record-breaking run. Although earlier runs had gone well, Jessi had expressed concern about the risks involved. She and Madden had even made plans to relax at a house in Lake Tahoe after wrapping up the attempts, but driven by ambition and heart, she decided to do one final run, to confirm the record, then walk away from speed racing for good. That afternoon, Jessi roared across the desert at a jaw-dropping speed of 841.338 kilometers per h, officially surpassing O'Neill's long-standing record. But just as she began to slow down, disaster struck. The front wheel assembly failed. As the vehicle decelerated past the end of the course, the broken assembly sent debris flying into the car's electronics and mechanical systems. In a matter of seconds, everything unraveled. Jessi's jet car crashed and she was killed instantly. Terry Madden was the first to reach the scene. Grieving and heartbroken, he later shared his anguish and pride on Instagram, assuring the world that Jessi's team had done everything they could to ensure her safety. Her death was a devastating blow, not just to her loved ones, but to the entire racing world. Jessi Combs wasn't just a racer. She was also a master metal fabricator, television host, and role model. She had inspired millions through her appearances on shows like Mythbusters, Overhaulin', and Extreme 4x4, where her upbeat personality, work ethic, and technical skills shined. She championed women in motorsports, constantly encouraging others, especially young girls, to break barriers. In the days following her death, tributes poured in. Her family remembered her bright smile, her fearlessness, and her relentless pursuit of her dreams. And in 2020, Guinness World Records officially recognized her final run, cementing her legacy. Jessi Combs, the fastest woman on Earth. Terry Madden's tribute was especially moving. He shared a montage of their memories together, writing that while the pain of losing her would never fade, he would continue to honor her legacy and spread her spirit of courage and determination. Jessi Combs lived and died doing what she loved most. Her story is a powerful reminder of the passion and peril that come with chasing greatness.